to Me, the podcast where we break the stigma, build the support, and speak the truth about life after bariatric surgery. Today's guest is someone who brings wisdom from both sides of the journey, as a patient and as a professional. Ashlyn Douglass Barnes is a licensed clinical social worker and founder of Advance Bariatric Counseling, and she's also the creator of findabariatrictherapist.com. She's helping change mental health in terms of the bariatric world and also helping other therapists do the same. Welcome, Ashlyn. Just want to put it out there, guys, while I have it fresh in my mind. She is a therapist, but not your therapist. So just want to disclaimer that before we get going. But how are you today?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me and that wonderful intro.
Thank you for being here with us. So, Ashlyn, let me ask you. If you could describe your bariatric journey in one word today, and just for today, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's such a good question. I love that we start off with such a stumper too. I would say unexpected.
Okay.
So first I was gonna say transformative, but I think unexpected. I think I had such low hopes for what bariatric surgery was gonna do, and I didn't realize at the time how many areas of my life it would touch, that it wouldn't just be my personal or my health or my business. Like I had no idea where it was going to take me. I didn't know that that's where I would find community and friendship and understanding. And because when I had bariatric surgery 13 years ago, we didn't have Instagram or anything, so I didn't know anyone who had bariatric surgery, so I couldn't even imagine that there would be community and there would be events and there would be all these people that I could meet and interact with and build friendships with. Because I think for me, I struggled so much growing up around like friendship and belonging, and feeling so different. And I think
Yeah.
that I had no idea that part of my journey would actually be transformative in that nature and not just my health, which was such the focus that I had
Yeah.
when I originally had bariatric surgery.
Same. I literally was like, I'm just gonna get skinny. And then fast forward, I have to look at myself in the mirror, not just from a physical standpoint, but like, who am I on a deeper level? Who am I? Am I what I thought I was? Am I a projection of what people put on me? Like, there's so much unpacking that has happened, and I'm still figuring it out. By no means do I have it figured out. Now, let me ask you, who
Ooh.
is Ashlyn before surgery? Because I know that it's been a while, right? And maybe you said 13 years. I had my first surgery in 2011, but lap band. And there, to your point earlier, there was no community. So,
Right.
uh, how was it for you getting into this before surgery? Did you have any nerves tied into it? Were you
Yeah,
readily
I
informed?
so I had my surgery in 2012, so probably right after. And it's interesting because lap band was really popular at the time, but my surgeon wasn't doing it. Um, but I would say I was so focused on avoiding diabetes. So I had kind of gotten on this roller coaster where my PCOS had gotten really bad. My insulin resistance was like out of control. I had a provider that like discharged me from his practice because my insulin was so high, and he's like, your pancreas is going to die, like you're going to become insulin dependent diabetic, I don't know what to do. He like sent me to his personal endocrinologist who was useless, who sent me to another endocrinologist, and eventually I ended up at Mayo Clinic, and they were like, it's kind of experimental, but like, have you considered having bariatric surgery? It was actually like a resident who was like, I saw a study, and I was like, okay. So it's odd because it wasn't on my radar at all, and so it was offered. And then from that point forward, it's like, yes, yes. What do I have to do? I have to talk to this person. I have to clear this. So I didn't have as much like nerves about it as much as it was just like, I have this potential solution and I need to figure out how to get to it in time so that we can kind of save my pancreas and avoid diabetes, because I just seen how destructive diabetes was in my family, in the community that I worked in. I was working for the health department at the time, so I was getting a lot of
Mhm.
like statistical feedback about the community I physically lived in. And even though I was working in the perinatal department, or in family planning and perinatal, I also was getting all these facts about like the health or lack thereof of the community that I worked in. And so I think there was like this other level of like the race against time. And so I
Yeah,
really didn't have an opportunity to really even be worried about it. And I had it at Mayo Clinic, so in my head I'm like I'm in the safest possible place. Like I'm probably
right.
gonna die. Um, and they were all like, "Oh, other than the diabetes, you're pretty healthy." And I'm like, "Okay." And they're like, "You're pretty young." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's true." So like we think it's gonna be great. And I'm like, okay. As long as I wake up and I, my insulin resolves itself, I don't really care what it takes or what I have to go through to get there. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of where I was at prior to surgery.
That's funny because when I went into having my lap band, I was like very uninformed. I was just like, I just want to get skinny because I'm probably like not very healthy. I didn't do a whole lot of research. My doctor even was like, "Do you want your gallbladder?" And I'm like, "Do I need it?" And he was like, I mean, I was like, "Well, take it." Like that's where I was. Like I was just like, "All right, like if this is gonna help me live a little longer, then let's just do it." So, kind of in the same spot as you. And again, for those who don't have context, like 2011, 2012, there were support groups, but not as many and not in the way we are seeing it now, where there's a lot of virtual spaces. And I absolutely love that. Now, in terms of your profession, did you always know that you wanted to go the bariatric route in terms of like doing this in the
No.
mental health space for bariatric, or that developed later?
It developed later. So in my mind, I was like, I haven't gotten it figured out. So how on God's earth am I going to help anyone else figure it out? So in my head, I was like, I could never work. And also, there's been a huge shift in our field surrounding like lived experience. When I started in the field, you were supposed to kind of be away from lived experience. So lived experience is where you've gone through something yourself. So as
Yeah,
therapists back then, the feeling was you shouldn't do what is too close to you because you may not be able to be part impartial or you may not be able to separate yourself from your clients. And so there's this real push to like not do anything that related with your own stuff. Hence I was working in like perinatal work and had never been pregnant or had any kids. But I had training and you rely on training. So it was maybe like 6, 7, 8 years before I actually went into doing bariatrics as a specialty. um, there were just so few, and I had had such negative experiences myself with bariatric therapists that are people that said that they specialize in bariatrics when they really didn't. Um, so I was like, I like got into it slowly. I did some evaluations, and then that's eventually I like developed more where people were like, I want someone with lived experience, and then there was a really big shift within our within the counseling community where we were like, hey, like you can do it and you're probably good at it and you are professional enough to know how to separate where you start and people begin. And then there was a big push for people with lived experience to have voices within those counseling communities to say like, hey, are we treating, and I think it's important too because there's a lot of implicit bias in bariatrics on the therapy side, and that's one reason that I specifically do training and try to help people because there's this implicit bias that people that are obese are dumb. They
really.
don't know how they got there. They need more help. And just think about the evaluation itself, right? So
Yeah,
if you went to go get your gallbladder out, no one would have asked you anything about your mental health. If you went and had breast augmentation, if you went and had I don't know, the only other surgeries you have psyche valves for are transplants. And
mm,
so and gender affirming care. So what we used to call sex reassignment surgery. But outside of those few things, it's not something that we do. And so there's this implicit bias that somehow we need more education, we need another level of people to say you're good to do this. And so I definitely brought a lot of like, hey, are we really looking at this in a way that we look at everything else? People have the right to choose what to do with their bodies. We kind of agree with that, except when it comes to this.
mm.
That seems kind of
Right.
odd. And even though mental health support is really important, I really wanted there to be a voice that wasn't so gatekeepy. Like, have you
Yeah,
really tried enough diets before you could choose that bariatric surgery? Or have you
right.
proven somehow, And so there was a lot of therapists that were like, well, nobody gets a clearance from me until they have 10 sessions and they tell me All, they prove to me this and prove to me that. And it's like, first off, it's unethical to demand therapy when you don't know there's a medical need.
Right.
And that's like an ethical standard that we have. You can't force people into therapy outside of like court ordered, but like in regular therapy, you're assuming medical need when there may not be. It also is an implicit bias that people that are obese that need more therapy in order for you
Therapy.
them to prove. So I really wanted to make sure that someone with lived experience was in those rooms to be like, look around and think about like how we think of this, what kind of stigma do we bring in, and like also things like, have you thought about that your couch may not hold, or your doorway may not be wide enough, or the chairs in your waiting room have, arms? Like, have you thought about stuff like that? And most of, I went to there's a local eating disorder clinic that suggested that they have a specialty in beaching or knowledge about bariatrics. And I walk in and I was like, "What's the weight limit on your couch?" He was like,
They, they probably looked at you like, what the hell?
right, because they're like, no one's ever asked us that before, and I'm like, well, if you work with bariatric clients, you may want to know because they may have questions
That's a
for
good
you about
point.
that. And I had early in my career, I had someone who accidentally broke my couch, and
Mm,
I felt horrible because I was working for someone else, so I didn't really have control over it. But he had put his hand back to like get himself up, and he split it. There's like a
oh,
piece of
shoot.
wood. And so when we replaced it, I had told my boss, I'm like, I need a sleeper sofa. And she's like, why do you need a sleeper sofa? I'm like, because there's a lot of stuff in between and you won't break it. Because there won't be
Yeah.
any wood. It's the metal. And she was like, oh, okay. And I have one in my office now. I have one in here. It's weird. I'm sure if I ever had to go to the board and they were like, why do you have a sleeper sofa in your therapy office? But I would tell them sleeper sofas in general have a much higher weight limit. And
No, but that's
now,
valuable because, like, here's the thing, right? Like, those are the little things that mean the most, right? Because how embarrassing. Like, I could just imagine for myself if I'm breaking somebody's furniture, I'm automatic like, oh, I'm never going back. Like, you're probably never gonna see me again. But like the fact that you're thinking about this, I feel like they don't give enough credit to lived experience because I know personally for me, I feel like I resonate more with someone who has walked the walk and now they're talking the talk as opposed to like, I don't know, sometimes you go to like a personal trainer and this person's never been big a day of their life. And it's like, do you know what I'm feeling? Like, and you're telling me to keep pushing through. So I think that that's really, really powerful. Now, what exactly does it take for a bariatric? Let's say, for example, there's a lot of therapists in the community, but like, what do they have to do to become a bariatric therapist?
so this is the tough part. There's no actual path to being which is part of why I created the training because there isn't a
Okay.
lot out there. There is a like certification that's out there, but it's kind of like people have asked me like, why isn't yours a certification? I'm like, because it'd be the certification of me. Like I've no, you just be
Right.
paying me money to say you're certified. There is one out there. I've done it. I found that the information wasn't as useful, and it wasn't. What I'm always looking for in training is how to do it,
Right.
not the information, but like, what are the questions I want to ask? What am I trying to elicit? Like, what is the information? What are the examples? So when I created the training that I did for therapists, which again, you don't need, but people often are like, hey, you have lived experience. Like, I try to use all of the examples surrounding where bariatric clients may come from. So when we're looking at therapy, we're often looking at like core beliefs. And so if you grew up in a larger body, you may have core beliefs surrounding your worthiness. You're only worthy if you are the best friend, you are the best daughter, you are producing, you are always showing up for people. So that kind of shows up usually in people pleasing, but it's
Mhm.
not people pleasing for kind of some of the more traditional ways that we look at that in like non bariatric populations. That's more societal pressure surrounding being in a larger body. And
Mm.
so it's harder for some therapists to understand how deep rooted that is because they're like, okay, well, they're not in a large body anymore. Like, but it's always kind of hanging there. Like, but if you gained it back, but if you lost the weight and you became another person and you all of a sudden up showing up for people differently, like that's a different skill set. So, in order to be a therapist, period, you get your bachelor's degree, you get an advanced master's degree, it's usually about 2 years, And then, depending on the state, you work under another therapist anywhere from 2 to 5 years, accumulating hours, and then getting supervision from like a supervisory therapist. So I'm one of those supervisory therapists now. I love working with new therapists. And so I train in all sorts of like bariatrics. I have some other specialties too, um but it takes a lot to become a therapist first, in the first place. And then we're kind of left on our own for specialties often, to get the training. And so I've sought out, so like American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery, ASMBS, has some training, and I go to their conferences every year, but there isn't necessarily a training that's like you do it and now you are, because to me, they are the only certification I would ever pay for or endorse, because it's the certification of ASMBS. It's not like
Yes.
me, like a human who just like, I have a certification like that. I don't know. That always just rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm like, it doesn't have any backing.
Yeah.
But if ASMBS created one, I would definitely obtain that and back that. There just isn't one. So generally, you just want to ask, like, have they been trained? Have they worked with other bariatric patients? But I find if you ask them a couple questions, most people will show their cards pretty quickly. If they have a bias towards it, if they immediately go down the eating disorder route, like that's usually a red flag. I think
Okay.
that's probably the biggest implicit bias that therapists carry, is that obesity is an eating disorder. They don't think of it directly like that, but it's like they're always looking for that eating disorder behavior and not
Yeah.
always looking on the medical side of things or the societal pressure side of things. Or, um, if you have societal pressure around being in a larger body to be perfect eating all day, that may look like binge eating, because if you eat perfect all day and then you get home, you're starving, and then you're
Mhm.
alone and now you start to eat. And so that may not be eating disorder behavior. That may be more, we have to work on like removing the societal pressure and what that does for us during the day so that we eat enough. So instead of working on kind of the compulsory behaviors, we're actually working on adding more food during the day, ensuring that we're like eating enough, and so that at night it's not kind of this perfect storm of I'm really hungry, I'm alone, no one can see me. Like that's a different way
Yeah.
of looking at it versus from like an impulse.
Oh my goodness. And one of the things that fascinate me is trauma. I know it's such a sexy word, but how much of it do you find could potentially be creating some of the things we see with maybe our eating habits, or how we cope some of us cope with food or deal with emotions with food. How much of it do you see with what you've seen thus far?
Yeah. In general, there's almost always some level of trauma in the general population. So it makes sense that within our population, there would be some trauma. I think that a lot of people get really stuck because they're like, nothing really bad happened to me. But when we start to kind of look into it, it's like, well, but you had like a series of, and sometimes it's very um, not as direct. It's like a parent that's really obsessed with their own weight, and so you
Mm,
start to look at your weight a different way. Or growing up, you didn't have a lot of money to go on vacations and do fun things, so your family utilized food. And even though that's not like trauma, like how normal people would view trauma, poverty, chronic struggle can actually create trauma. And so it
mm,
may not be that the food itself was the trauma, but the trauma might have caused some of the patterns in your family. And it also may be societal. It may be um, things that were going on within your family. It may not have been directly happening to you, but maybe happened to a parent. Maybe it happened, and it's nobody's fault. It might, like, a parent died, or and then the other parent was left to try to manage things. And so again, someone may say, "Well, I handled that really well," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that I think that probably affected your life." And so we used to talk about big T, little t, so big traumas, little traumas. We don't really view it that way anymore.
mm.
But there is some really interesting research about kind of when people have some of these, like what we call those big T traumas. So, particularly surrounding sexual abuse, that there are some wirings that sometimes can happen. I think both from, and it's really interesting. I'll have to send it to you. There's some really interesting research on like how brains sometimes get rewired with trauma. Not necessarily directed to food, but sometimes it then creates how your body like holds on to weight. And it's kind of this
Mm,
double-edged sword too, where it's like you're because of how the cortisol changes because of the traumatic event, your body holds on to weight more. You may also feel like you are less likely to be abused if you're of larger weight, which in general when you're a child it
I've
doesn't
heard
really
that.
matter. Yeah. But that's the because no one sits down and talks to you about it or nobody
Yeah.
knows, you create your own conclusions on like, oh, well, if I hadn't done this or I hadn't done that, so I'm going to try to do the opposite so it doesn't happen again. Um, and so oftentimes those can then also kind of create some thoughts and beliefs surrounding body weight and food. And so, yeah, so oftentimes trauma is connected to it. And it's interesting, some people that have no trauma, and I put everything on do not disturb but my
You're good.
iPad. Let me,
You are good.
all right, there we go. So I think that that can be something too that it's not always as directly connected as we think. So it's not everyone that's traumatized ends up in a larger body, or that's the only way people end up in larger bodies. But I do think there's often kind of a mix of um, there are situations that led to the trauma being able to happen to begin with, which might have been a neglect on like a parent or neglect on just general like the parent did well but the school didn't, so like there's some level of something else was going on, and then so I already feel like I'm not too worthy because there's some level of neglect going on, then I was abused or someone felt like they were paying attention and that felt good, and then I was abused and that felt bad, and now I don't understand because it's like, very, and again, we're kids, so we can't make conclusions usually correctly about what happened. So instead of identifying it as, I was vulnerable because I wasn't watched over, you identify that I shouldn't have talked to that man, I shouldn't have let that teacher get so close to me, and it's my fault that this bad thing happened to me, instead of like a lot of adults failed you, including the adult that abused you. And so, and they're an adult, so it's like it never
Right.
could be consensual. So I think that there's, again, like some, and then our beliefs about ourselves that develop from that. So, yeah.
What do you think the future of like mental health in this bariatric space is going? Because I feel like I had a conversation with someone else in the mental health field, and they're like, "Oh, this DSM-5 is so dated, and like there's just not enough information right now. Like all these things are unfolding as like in real time. Like, where do you think the future of like mental health specifically for bariatric is
Oh my
going
God.
from what you're seeing?"
So this one is so tough too because I always remind therapists, like, yes, the DSM exists, but it doesn't really dictate how we treat. I'm always going to be treating symptoms anyways. So I am not going to be treating depression. I'm going to be treating isolation. I'm going to be treating, not feeling joy in anything. Like we're going to treat the symptoms versus so whatever the DSM. Yeah, it probably is outdated. But I do think debating how much to get into this, but I do think there are different types of therapies now that don't necessarily focus on like diagnosis. Um, in our family systems, which talks about all the different parts of our brain and how they interact, how they developed. They usually develop because of things that happened in our childhood. They develop into jobs that they didn't want. They sometimes come out in ways that help us and sometimes come out in ways that don't help us. And so that has been probably for me as a therapist the most interesting thing kind of up and coming. I think also, and I'm not a part of this community, but definitely the psychedelics and other alternative treatments to traditional medications. I definitely think there's something that's going to come about with that. Already we're seeing that with like ketamine, even on the non psychedelic side of things. I'm a little on the sidelines on that. I would like that to be more figured out before I jump
Yeah,
into it. But
yeah.
I'm very excited, from the sidelines. to see what that brings, because we definitely I've had clients who've had really good success, and I've even other clinicians who are getting into the field after lived experience doing them on their own. But I would like to see some FDA. I'd like to see a little more, just for my own liability, like figuring out how we're going to manage all that before I jump in. But I do think that how we treat medication wise probably will change over the next 10 years. There's some pretty interesting stuff with infusions. There was a perinatal project that I was involved in for this infusion that like was amazing. I think they're testing it now just in women in general. So again, I think even us viewing like perimenopause, menopause, hormones, those are like so hard to treat and so tricky because like I could be a 44 and you could be a 44 and I feel like I'm tanked and you feel amazing because your
Right.
body needs less and mine needs more, and there's no universal way to test for it. And it's really challenging. And oftentimes it's like you have to try it and figure out if it works, and then we know it works. And obviously, doctors hate doing that. So I think like in that view too of things, I think we're just a little stuck. Insurance makes us stuck. We still have to have diagnoses. We still have to show medical necessity. Like we still have to prove that your coming is helping, and we're not supposed to use therapy just for therapy's sake, even though I think most people could use therapy for therapy's sake.
Right.
And so, but I do think we will, specifically in the bariatric space, I have a feeling that we will continue to kind of look bigger picture versus like, are you stacking habits? Are
Right.
you, like making sure your water bottle is visible when you should be drinking it and in the refrigerator when you shouldn't? Like, I think we're going to get more into the, what stops us from doing the things that we know we need to do, because there's usually bigger picture. I definitely looking into better treatment for neurodivergency, ADHD,
Oh, that's
because
a good
that
one.
definitely impacts. Yeah, me too. Definitely impacts, things like habits and making things long term and being able to kind of keep it all straight in our minds. So I
Yeah.
think definitely there'll be more focus on that.
Yeah. Oh my God, that I cannot wait for that because I do feel like to a degree when you do have other diagnoses or things coming up where you're not necessarily neurotypical or what they like to call neurotypical, um, I don't necessarily love habits. I don't necessarily love uh repetitive tasks day in, day out, which is why meal prepping may not necessarily be a thing for me. Why sometimes I don't always drink or eat at the same time every single time. Why, while I'm on a GLP-1, people are like, you should do it the same day of the week. I'm like, I try. Sometimes it just goes into its own little pocket in my brain. You're what I would consider a veteran in this thing because you're 13 years out at this point. As an OG veteran of this bariatric game, what comes up for you now? Because I think a lot of people think, well, when I'm 10 years out, I'm going to have this all figured out. When I'm 20 years out, nothing's going to come up for me mentally. I'll have this all down packed. Does anything still kind of stump you?
Yeah, I think probably what you just like rolling with the punches for me can be challenging. So I was someone who like meal prepped for a long time because I was in the office a lot and I worked really long hours. And then my world shifted a little bit, and then I was home a lot, still working a lot, but at home. So do you meal prep when you're home? Do you not? So I think that for me, yeah, kind of what you just said actually is some of the hardest stuff for me. And I always have to be rolling with like what works for me now. So now what meal prep looks like is cutting up all the vegetables and putting them in a box. So that when I want
Nice.
them, I just take the box out and then I take out what I want and I put the box back, but I'm not necessarily making the thing because I also notice there's a part of me that if you take away choice, I will rebel. And it's very old
Mm,
part of me. It's been around for a really long time. And it screams, it's not fair and I need choice. So I'm the middle of five kids. So we didn't get a lot of choice. We had a lot of like, for my mom's own sanity, we ate all the same foods. We didn't really have a lot of choice, and so particularly around food, I need a lot of choice. So like I would bring more options than what I would need for meal prep when I go to work, knowing I'd bring some home so that it still felt like I had choice. That was really important to me. So it took me a long time to figure that out. I would often like, gaslight yourself and be like, you should be able to, you're great, you should be able to do this. This is what success means. But I think that I really had to accept that I needed to like continue to change what that looks like for me. It was pretty tough when I decided that I needed to get on a GLP-1. So I also am on a GLP-1. I have been for quite a while now and probably will be lifelong, because I really felt like that meant I really didn't have it all together, that I really didn't have it figured it out. But what I realized is that obesity is a chronic lifelong disease that's going to need continuation of treatment, and what worked at one point may not work at another, and it is okay for me to continue to seek out treatment. A GLP-1 helps me to be able to do all the things that I know that I need to do in an easier way without me fighting it constantly, and it gives me a lot of emotional, mental space to do all the other things that I need to do other than just focusing on food and exercise all the time. So I think that was something, and it hit like during the pandemic. I think I went back on one in like 2000 or 2021. And I knew I had had a little bit of a GLP-1 before I had surgery. So Byetta was the first generation of GLP-1 injectable. You took it 2 hours before your two largest meals, and it worked amazing for me. What's going on for me and my obesity is very, very strongly linked to insulin resistance. When it resolves, the
Yeah.
weight falls off. And so getting back onto a GLP-1, or when I got on one in 2021, kind of helped me get back to, okay, my entire life space isn't about meal prepping and monitoring and counting and doing all these things. Like I can now remove that and start another business and sleep and, think about things other than food. And that did take me a long time to accept that I needed that, and that it was okay. And I was also being okay for other people to be able to make that choice too. Um,
Yeah. How do you like navigate shame? Because I think
mm,
I hear sometimes, not just from you, but myself, from other people, like, oh, now after bariatric surgery, and now I need to be on a GLP-1, or in some situations, for me, I'm going to speak for myself. I gained 30 pounds after I had my son, and it's just been there. Like and I'll be honest, I don't always do all of the things that people expect you to do when you're on a bariatric journey, but I carry a lot of shame for the regain, because even little things, right? Like my mom the other day, and I love her, but sometimes she says crazy things. She's like, "Look at you all chubby." And just I was just like
oh,
I was like, but I really had to like sit with that for a second, and if I felt horrible because I was like, "Man, I did the surgery and it was like for what? Because I'm holding on to this weight." Like so many people feel like that. What do you tell those people that walk around with all that shame?
yeah, I think there's this incorrect feeling that like surgery is the end of the road. And if you
Yeah.
don't do well with surgery, well, it's the end of the road. That's all. Like you took the most extreme tactic to lose the weight, and so therefore it has to be the ending. And I think that doesn't take into account the like medical aspect of obesity and the underlying cause for a lot of people's obesity and how our body often is working against us. It does not surprise me that during pregnancy that you had weight gain that didn't go away, because that's how our bodies work. If we think about if
Yeah.
when you were a cave person after you had a baby, because you had back in cave people times, you breastfed because that's all you had, and if you didn't have enough meat on your bones, then your baby would die. So like
Yeah.
it makes sense that evolutionary wise that we developed, particularly women developed in a way that we held on to weight, particularly after hormonal changes. So I think that shame is probably the hardest thing to treat because there's many, many underlying beliefs that we have about it and why we need to hold on to it, because it makes us a better person. It makes sure that we're humble, that we are grateful, that we are aware. We're not terrible people. We're not
Mhm.
narcissists. We're not whatever the thing we're trying not to be, right?
Right.
So I think too, for me, especially in the beginning, I really struggled with this like Mayo Clinic took a chance on me. They don't normally do the surgery on people my age. They don't. normally do it for these reasons necessarily. And if I'm not a good example, I let them down. I
Mm,
wasn't the person that they should have chose, and I wasn't deserving of the opportunity to live a life without diabetes and PCOS. So I think like that's where I try to kind of one acknowledge when it's happening to be like, is that really necessary? Because shame can be motivating in the short term, but not in the long term. It usually derails us in the long term. And so that's kind of where you kind of need to be like, okay, like I understand that I'm trying to motivate myself to get up and go to the gym or meal prep or whatever I'm trying to do by like shaming myself about this. But is that actually going to help me in the long term? Probably not. Figuring out
yeah.
what's going to work. So I was watching this YouTube video today with my husband, and it's someone that we watch, and they lost a bunch of weight, and they're explaining like how they did it, and they're like, "Oh, I get up at 4:30 every morning, and I work out for 2 hours, and I'm watching all of my, I have a trainer, and I'm watching every calorie, and I'm changing the macros scientifically every week." And I- my husband looked at me, and I was like, "That's not maintainable." If the
Yeah.
only way you can keep your weight off is working in the gym 2 hours a day and like counting every morsel of food, like it's not worth it. Because
Yeah.
I had the surgery to live my life. So I've also had some balances where I had to say, this is a season of my life that weight is not going to be number one on my plate because I am building a business, I am buying a house, I'm dealing with a health issue, whatever I'm doing, and for this season. And when this season ends, it'll come back to the forefront. But for right now, I have to be okay that this cannot be number one because really I have other things, and we do. We have other things going on. You were making a baby. Like your body, like your number one was like being healthy for your child. And it's like that might not be you killing it at the gym. That might be you being
Right.
present. And in that season, that's more important than that's okay. But I think, yeah, the shame is like the hardest. It's the hardest.
Oh,
It's the hardest to treat in therapy.
that I think that you said a lot in that moment because I was like picking up little things here and there, but one of the things that stood out for me is like who shows up for Ashlyn now because you show up for a lot of people. And I think a lot of times I hear therapists say a therapist need a therapist, but a lot of therapists that I've known don't have a therapist. But like who takes care of Ashlyn when you have these moments?
Well, I would say probably foremost my husband. I've been really lucky. My husband and I knew each other before I had bariatric surgery. We have been together 18 years. We've been married for 11.
Oh.
He has been, woo, girl, he has been through it with me. He has been through it with me. It's interesting. He actually had his own weight loss journey over the past couple years, where he
Oh.
has lost weight and done his thing. And so sometimes I feel like he's more emotionally intelligent than I am. Because he'll sit down and be like, "We actually need to talk about this." I'm like, "Hell no, we don't need to sit down and talk." Or he'll give me kind of a look like, "Yeah, did you just say that?" But I would say outside of that, I have always struggled with who shows up for me. Often because I don't allow people, or in the past, I haven't
Mm.
allowed people because then they can't disappoint me. So if
Oh.
I don't have a ton of people that can show up for me, then I don't get to be disappointed when they don't show up for me, because there's some vulnerability in asking people to show up and they don't. And
Mm.
so I think that for the past, I don't know, couple years that I've been working on that, and also like being okay with being disappointed and being okay, if I need to have certain people less. Not that I cut people out, but like if I'm pouring a lot of energy into a friendship and that energy isn't coming back, I may just choose to put my energy and focus in other places. But I realize that for a lot of people, it takes a lot of vulnerability. I think about the first meetup I went to. I didn't know anyone. It was local, so I could escape if it was terrible. And I'm like sitting on the bed, and I'm like, you have to do this because this is the only way you will meet new people. And it was kind of before Instagram and stuff. So like if I want to
Yeah.
meet new people, I got to put myself in situations to meet new people.
Right.
Um, I do have an amazing therapist who knows absolutely nothing about bariatrics, and that's okay. But we work on kind of all the other stuff. I have a bariatric provider within the Mayo Clinic, who it's interesting because she's also my colleague, like at ASMBS. I see her and love that she's still um, at Mayo.
Oh,
And I think to other professionals who are bariatric patients and bariatric providers, nutritionists, or dietitians, I have to make sure I say the right word, dietitians, and that's actually one of the things I would like to eventually do is have a retreat for bariatric patient providers.
nice.
So for us to actually have space and community because it's tough, especially, I know I have disappointed some of my clients when I went on a GLP-1 and talked about it because then
Mm,
that meant I hadn't figured it all out. And so then we had to process that. What does that mean? And what does that mean for them? And what does that, and I think that it's challenging because at one part of me wanted to be very open and vocal about the fact that obesity is a is a condition that we have to have continuation of treatment. And on the other, I also felt deeply that that may make people feel a certain way, and
yeah.
so I had some support, especially early on with the GLP-1 because it wasn't widely used when I started, but I knew there were some people within the community who were on one and maybe not super vocal about it. And I kind of sought out some people that were utilizing it. And I think also like I wanted to deeply understand scientifically how it works, so that I could better articulate when like I don't know, I was having like photos taken, and I remember the photographer was like, is that Ozempic stuff as good as everyone thinks? And I was like, let me explain to you how it works because I know your thought is it's an anorexic. It just makes people stop eating. But that's not
Right.
actually how it works. That's like amphetamines. This is not amphetamines. This works completely different. And it was so interesting because I ran into him again at another event where he was taking photos. And he was like, "Hey, I'm so glad we talked about that because like my mom needed to get on one, and I felt a lot better knowing
Oh,
that what I knew from you and I knew it would help her and in my head I'm like I'm really glad that we had had that conversation because if he had come to her and she was like, "Mom, you don't need that." Like, would
right.
that have been maybe not, maybe she would have done it anyways. But I think that especially for people that have never experienced that, wouldn't understand why food not taking up your entire brain space may be helpful for them to do everything else in their life, and why like your mental health is actually a part of why you may want to be on a GLP-1. And that yes, that doesn't do that for everybody. And obviously there are other factors to it, but I think that just being able to have some of those conversations has really been helpful. I've had people in my personal life who are not bariatric patients come to me and like, "Hey, I know you're on that GLP-1. Can I talk to you about it?
That's
How
cool.
can I how do I process it?" Or I have a long time friend that I have hoped for many years would consider bariatric surgery just because I know it would benefit. She loves to travel. Travel is so
Yeah.
complicated when you're in a larger body.
Yes.
And but she got on a GLP-1 and had really good success with it. And I was so happy for her because I knew that it was going to make traveling, she was just here this weekend. She's like, I didn't have to use a seat extender on this flight I was on.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, doesn't that feel great? And so, I think being able to be that for other people, but also allowing other people to be that for me too, to talk, it isn't all, rainbows uh,
No, it's not.
and unicorns, that there is kind of these, you know, I think too, even in the business world, like I'm an entrepreneur now, and that could be kind of lonely. And so again,
It
having
is.
other therapists, but sometimes I have to be the one that's like, hey, we're getting together for a pool day. It's going to be on this day. We're going to do resort pass. We're all going to show up. We are going to have some we
What?
oh my gosh, being in Orlando, we have the best resort pass. We actually this week, the Ritz-Carlton has
Okay.
a spa pass, but there's a pool that belongs to the spa. So for
Oh, shoot.
99 bucks a person, you get to use the spa and the pool. Yeah,
That's
so
not a
we're gonna
bad
do that, and
deal.
then we talk businessy stuff, we talk other stuff, but it's just like a day to kind of like relax and chill. And but I think it's no matter where you are, whether it's bariatrics or business, it's like community. Like I've really realized that like community is really important, especially because I'm so hyper independent. I can take care of
Same.
it all myself. I almost feel annoyed if someone thinks that I can't. And so like I have to be very like it is okay.
We might be the same person. I swear to you. And I have a hard time delegating. Now I have a team. We're a throuple. It's a team of two, outside of myself. Uh, and yes, 100%. And to your point about there's a lot of parallels between being bariatric and being an entrepreneur, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. Um, Community is important. One, we don't failure is like what the like when failure happens, especially when you're invested financially or with your journey, when you're invested in your journey and failure happens, like it hits us like a ton of bricks. But here's what I will say, because I love talking about failure, because I think if we start reframing failure and looking at it as just a data point, and not so much a thing that determines what you're capable of, that is super empowering. It's been super empowering for me. I want to fail fast, and I want to fail, as fast as I can, and learn as much as I can out of that
Yes.
failure.
That's always my thing too. Failure is a learning experience. So it is
Absolutely.
not a moral, it's not a reaction or a reflection of your morality. It is more a learning to say, okay, this did not work. So I've done stuff in business that I want so bad to work. I really want support groups to work. I have tried my hardest to make some, it just doesn't work for what I've got going on right now. It just doesn't work right. But I wanted to. I worked really hard. I had the mailing list. I had the stuff. I had the interesting content. I had the social media, and it just flopped. And it's cool, and that's okay. Like in another season of my life, in another, that will be my focus. But it's okay
Period.
that it's not now. But it is hard, especially like when you really love. You're like, I really want this to succeed. But yes, great example of failure. Do I have one? I have hundreds of them. So I wrote a journal. Do I have it? I may not. I wrote a journal and bought a billion of them to sell, and then no one bought them. It made me laugh so hard. I have them somewhere. And the whole part of the journal for bariatrics is you learning failure, switching failure to learning experiences. So reflecting on what didn't go well today, and how to reflect that for tomorrow, and what I learned and what I'm going to change. But it's really funny because I'm like, this is such valuable stuff, and I'm like, whatever. Now it's out there, it's in the ether. If people want it, they can have it. But
Yeah.
and again, that
But you
kind of
know
like
how
moved
long
into
Harry Potter was out, and no one like messed with Harry Potter for a while. So like you would be surprised. This may be your Harry Potter 2, 3 years down the line.
it could be, and it's out there. I'll show you
Yeah.
what it looks like. It's out there. Hold on, I'm actually gonna grab it because I
Yeah, go for it.
know. There it is. So I have a post-op one and a pre-op one, but the front part of it is like skills, and then with
Mm,
reflection questions, but the most important part is in the back where it has these like reflection days. And so it gives you space to write out like what went well today that I hope will continue. And what did I learn from today's experiences to improve tomorrow? What are some negative self talk that I caught myself saying to myself? What are realistic self talk I can use in the future in their place? And is there anything else that I can plan for tomorrow? Because I think if when we really take time to like reflect about like what did I catch myself saying that I need the time and energy to think about what I'm going to put in its place? If I don't reflect on that, I often can't catch it. But if I'm like, ooh, I noticed I got really irritated with myself because I ran through the drive through because I didn't bring enough food with me.
mm,
And, you shouldn't be doing this. This isn't good. Instead of viewing it that way, one, like tomorrow, I got to know I got to get more food, bring more food with me. Two, sometimes I'm just going to have to do the best that I can. And in that moment, that was getting fed was the most important thing because I knew if I didn't, it was going to cause other, things later. And I was taking care of my need for hunger. And what I could say to myself, in the future when I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to do the best I can. I'm not going to go overboard. I'm going to be fed. I'm going to focus on protein, like whatever the thing is, like I'm going to make the best choice available to me and I'm going to keep it moving because if I keep ruminating on that, I don't have the capacity in my brain to do all the other things. So when I drive home and I need to be decompressing so I can show up as a wife when I go through the door and I'm not still at work, I'm not
Period.
doing that if I'm yelling at myself or going through the drive through. So if I actually give myself that time to say, okay, like reflect back, like what didn't work and what can I tell myself in the future. And sometimes this is good. This is a lot of what we do in therapy too. As we kind of rehearse some of this, like, okay, like what was so bad about you going through the drive-through? What did you,
Right.
what did you? And they're like, well, I got the grilled nuggets. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds that sounds pretty good. But I shouldn't be eating fast food. I'm like, okay, so that's a morality. Bad people eat fast food. I'm like, is that true? Do you know good people that eat fast food? Like, yeah, sometimes we just like, we that's our only option. Our day changed. It just realistically made sense. Or you wanted it. Like,
Yeah.
I saw that they brought the snack wrap back. Couldn't tell you the last time I had McDonald's during the day. I That's kind of a go-to breakfast. Egg McMuffin is actually pretty good
Okay.
from a macro. But I wanted one of those snack wraps. So my friend
Was
was
it
in town
good?
this week. It was good.
Oh, okay. I haven't got one yet. I'm gonna go grab
But
one.
honestly, the statistics or the nutritional facts on it aren't that bad in the end, as long as fat doesn't bother you from and again, like that was one of the big things that I had to look at. Like food is not good and bad, but certain food doesn't make me feel good, and I'm going to choose not to eat it because I'm not going to purposely make myself feel bad to punish myself for eating food. And so, yes, if that kind of food makes you sick, probably not a great idea to eat it. But if it
Okay.
doesn't and you want it and it fit in the rest of my day, it wasn't a big, but I wanted to know. They brought it back. And
You
they
know
gave
what I
us
was
really crappy fries that were terrible. And my friend and I both looked at each other and we were like, throw them away.
disappointed.
Like, we didn't eat them because they weren't good. And it was like, yay, win. Like, I didn't eat them just because they were there and I haven't had them in a really long time. They weren't good, so we weren't going to eat them. We're just going to eat the snack wrap.
So the journal, I know you said they didn't, are they still out? You
Oh,
said
yeah,
in
yeah.
the pub. Okay, where can they find the journals?
Okay, you can buy the journals. I also have the pre-surgical one. So they
Okay.
are on Amazon. If you look up my name, they're on Amazon. They're also on findabariatrictherapist.com in the
Yes.
store. So if you hit the store button on Find a Bariatric Therapist, they are there. They're also on Etsy.
Okay.
And all Etsy and my website has an immediate download. So you don't have to get the actual book, it's much cheaper. Or you can buy the
Nice.
physical book off either of those websites. And I'm not plugging these because I have so many, but I really do think like being able to have a place to like reflect that. I also have some like appointment notes and routine building. And where's my little page with the
You
like,
know what I could also see it being, Ashlyn? I could totally see it being an app. I mean, I'm just saying, we walk around with phones in our hands all freaking day.
oh
And
my
a
God.
lot of what you're saying, if I can see it being an app, just putting it out
Oh
there.
my word. I have to say that's one of the few things I haven't done. I love that. An app. Okay, cool. I'll put that on the list because it is funny when you get into like being an entrepreneur, none of that stuff. So I'm like, I want to, I don't know. Someone was like, can you do a training on this? Someone texted me today, was like, we should do a training on this. I was like, yeah. Like made an outline of it and sent it back. She was like, oh, I didn't actually think you were
Serious.
going to do work on it. I was like, yeah, girl, this sounds like a great training. Let's do it. Totally not
That's
related
me.
to bariatrics, but it's just funny because once you get into it, you're like, it's not that hard to
Yeah.
do. I could figure out how to make an app. Sure, why not?
Just
That's it.
you can get a
Mhm.
freelancer. Like, look, make this an app. Give them the book. Make it an app. So I know you said you have the journal, right? You have your company, and then you have this database. Where the hell did this database come from? I seen it before I even met you.
Okay, so the funny story about findabariatrictherapist.com. So I am a therapist in the state of Florida. One of the most annoying parts being a therapist is you're state bound by licensure. So in order
Right.
for me to see clients in any state, I must be fully licensed in that state. Um, there's something coming down the pipeline that eventually will fix that, but social workers are like way behind, so we won't have it for many, many years. So for right now, I'm only licensed in the state of Florida. So I went on a podcast a fairly large one that I did not know had the amount of downloads that they had at the time. And I woke up the morning after it aired, and on Instagram, I had like, I don't know, 15 people being like, I
What?
heard your story. I relate to you so much, and I need you to be my therapist. And not a single one of them lived in Florida. As a
Sheesh.
therapist, if someone reaches out to you for therapy and you cannot provide them therapy ethically, you have to provide them with a referral to someone who can. And so I was like, oh no, I have 15 states now where I need to. And I was able to find it. And then I was like, you know, it'd be really nice if we just had a one stop place where you could search. And so I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. So just like your app, I was like, I wonder how one does this. So I Googled around and fiddled with it, and I was able. It's really nice. There's a plugin actually that makes the directory, and
Nice.
so I had to figure out the plugin, and then I already know how to use Squarespace, so I like had to do a little like YouTube University on it, and then I keep it alive by the therapist pay to be listed. And so
Nice.
that gives me money to run the website and to sponsor bariatric events. And that also, it kind of round robin. So I can then go to events to be in front of bariatric patients. That helps the therapist get seen. I go on podcasts and other social media to talk about it and to drive traffic. And then hopefully also to find more people with lived experience. So my hope is that there's more bariatric. One of the questions on the directory is, are you a bariatric patient? And so those with lived experience can also be highlighted. And that is my hope with Find a Bariatric Therapist. And that's how it started. It didn't exist, and I
Wow.
felt like it needed to. And it's just really hard because you can find people that say they specialize in weight loss, but that's not bariatrics, or they
Right.
specialize in bariatrics, but what they really mean is eating disorders. And so it
Mm.
can be very hard then to like actually
I was gonna
um,
ask, how do you like fine tune, comb through all those entries? Because to your point, there's so many different niches and specialties and, in therapy for to find someone who's an actual bariatric therapist in a
yeah.
sense.
So they have to have some kind of training in bariatrics and a want to work in bariatrics. So in general, they're pretty motivated to work at bariatrics. If I get any feedback, which I have had, that if someone is not, so I had some feedback that there was one that was like implicit bias was like pretty aware, and I did let them know. I refunded their money and I removed them from the list because we couldn't have that. And after a conversation, I figured out it was pretty apparent. I don't think it was a misunderstanding. Um, so I also take any kind of feedback like that very seriously and will look into anything of that nature. And a lot of times too, they'll take my training, and now I know that they've had my training, and then we put them
Yeah.
onto the directory. And I would say a good majority of the people on there have lived experience, so I'm not too
Okay.
worried about them.
I love
But yeah, so
that.
that's how Find a Bariatric Therapist came to be.
Wow. That you see how that works when you're feeling a need or a gap in information. That is a lot of times where these businesses kind of
Mhm.
stem from. Like you saw that there was a need for this information and you filled a gap. I freaking love that. And I know there are a lot of mental health professionals who watch the podcast, come on the podcast. So if you are a Barry who is in the mental health space and are, wanting to be on the database. They just have to get on the page, right? Fill out like
Yep.
a,
And if you shoot me a message through my Instagram or through email, if you have lived experience sh- or you're a listener of this, just shoot me a message, and I have like discounts and other things to make it more reasonable. It's pretty cheap to list, anyways, but I try to make it even more doable.
okay, period. I did have a few quick rapid fire questions for you here. Some may be related to what we're talking about here, some may just be completely left field. So, you ready?
Hmm.
All right. How has the sex been post-op?
That is hilarious. So I will say self-confidence is a killer of most people's sex drive. So confidence has been good. Next question.
Yes. Okay. Any affirmations or mantra that you tell yourself daily?
I can figure this out.
Anyone inspire you in the bariatric space or anyone mentoring you in this space?
Sleep dietitian and I definitely feel like, especially from a business standpoint, because she had her business before I did. Um, yeah.
Okay. And one thing you wish every bariatric program included?
Oh gosh. I would more mental health, not the mental health from the clearance standpoint, but like alcoholism is a thing post-op. This is how you know the signs of it. You're not going to get a divorce, but if these things are happening already, this can be what it is. So more of like, this is what it is to look out for, and this is what you could do for it, and get into mental health care sooner than like you don't need a crisis. Like Doctor Now always drives me nuts. Is people are like living in a hospital for 6 months and their life is falling apart, and he's like, maybe we need to bring in therapy. I'm like, yes,
Maybe, maybe
maybe.
I think so. Well, you did really, really well in that round, and you're good on your toes, like a good entrepreneur, just good on her toes. I love that. I love that. So, Ashlyn, outside of your social media space, you said you're only seeing clients in Florida, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so are you currently taking clients, or are you just super booked and busy?
Yes and yes. So
Okay.
yes, I am seeing new clients. They can reach out to me, Advance Bariatric Counseling in the state of Florida. You can find me through Find a Bariatric Therapist or Advanced Bariatric Counseling. There's no D on advance. It's just advanced, not advanced. And I
Okay.
am in the Winter Park, Florida, the Orlando area. But I see most of my clients through telehealth. So no biggie if you
Ooh.
are somewhere else in Florida.
Nice. I love telehealth. Like, shout out to whoever thought of that because I was like, I don't want to see a doctor in their office if I don't have to. So, same thing with my therapist. I don't want to have to go to her office or sit on her couch and potentially break it.
Or sit in traffic in Orlando, like I'm off I-4. Like I feel bad. People come see me and they're like, I'm gonna be late. I'm sitting on I-4. I'm like, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I know it doesn't make any sense.
I know you just did the ASMBS conference. Any other events in the future for you?
Yeah, I mean, I usually do the Just Be You awards. We usually sponsor that award. I'm not huge into some of the other ones, but I hope to have an event eventually myself, but more focused on mental health, like
Yay.
more of a retreat than like an actual retreat of a small number of people. Uh,
Yeah.
but I haven't quite figured that one out yet, but that's kind of what I want someone to ask me the other day. Like, what's something new you're working on? I was like, I gotta say it out loud, so I'll do it. I really would like to do retreats specifically for patient providers, but also providers in and of themselves.
Ooh, it would be cool if you guys went to a destination or like or a spa
Yes,
resort or something like
I already
that.
know where we will have it because I there's a place in Costa Rica I
Ooh.
really like. Probably the first one's gonna be in Orlando because I live here. Then you guys can go to Disney when I'm done. Um, and it's easier too because I have like like there's
Yeah,
people I know here for some of that. So more to come
that'd
on
be
that.
really
And now I
nice.
may have to make an app. That's such a good
Listen,
idea.
I'm just
I have to give you
saying, look,
royalties,
what
girl.
just give me a little shout out. That's all. Just be like, look, shout out to Shar and this app idea. So, one of the things I like to just close out with because we always have people who listen who are pre-op, post-op, maybe a little further out. What are some like words of wisdom you could bestow on them in terms of managing their mental health? Because I think for me, it wasn't in the pamphlet that I was gonna experience really high highs and really low lows. What would you say to those folks going into this or who are there now?
Yeah, I would say seek out help early. You don't have to be in crisis to seek out help. Even establishing before, even if you're not going to see them continuously, when I do my pre-surgical evaluations, part of it is that you're establishing care with me so that not in crisis, you're trying to figure out who knows something about bariatrics. But like figuring out who that is, it's totally okay to therapist shop. If you do not like your therapist, find another one. There's lots of us.
Period.
And that's okay. And telehealth is awesome because there's probably a lot more therapists than the ones only in your area. And it's okay to, if you don't click with someone, to keep it moving and find the next one. We don't, in general, we don't take that personally. I know I'm not for everyone. I have ADHD. I talk a lot. That probably drives some people nuts, and that's okay. But for my clients who also talk a lot, they're like, "Oh my God." So, or
I'm
they
here for it.
previously
I
had a
kind of wish
therapist.
I lived in Florida
No,
now.
I know. So many people are like, "Oh, I wish I could." I'm like, I know. It's really tough. And the problem is I don't even know if I want a bunch of other licenses because I don't know if I could actually handle the volume of that. Now I have
Yeah.
other providers that work with me who have lived experience who also can see people. Everyone also is only licensed in Florida though. So, but my group also does have additional providers besides me.
Nice, nice. Well, I want to first off say thank you, Ashlyn. You have given us a lot of wisdom. You gave us a lot of perspective. I think that it is super important, and just like one of the common themes of tonight is that lived experience. If you have the ability to find a therapist who has walked the walk, that is golden. And just because someone has walked the walk doesn't necessarily mean that they will be a good fit for you. So keep your options open as long as you're able to be honest, not just with yourself, but with the therapist in the process so that they can actually guide you in the best way they possibly can, then I think you're in a good spot. It's already awkward. Like, I'll be honest, even with the best, I had a really great therapist, and even with her, the initial few visits were a little awkward. See
Hmm.
if you're able to get past that. Don't just write your therapist off either, because sometimes you just got to get over that initial awkwardness and then kind of go and see if that's a good fit for you. That has been helpful for me, and it may be something that to consider when you see your next therapist. So,
Yeah, especially
um,
the first visit as we're just trying to gather data. It is really challenging sometimes because it's like, I really want to talk about why you came here, but I need to know about all this other stuff because I have to write a big report about why I'm seeing you. So just especially the first session, like some patience. But
yes,
after that, and if you have a therapist that's silent and that's not your thing, that I wouldn't do well with that. Like it's okay. Like we all have different. Some therapists are more direct, some are more soft, some are quieter, some talk more, some um, will not kind of guide you, some will, and that's therapy styles, and that's okay. Like if it ain't working for you, it's okay to find another one.
yeah, we're not yucking your yum. So, without further ado, guys, I can't leave you without closing with a quick word of affirmation. People throw shade on what
What
shines.
shines? When in
When in
doubt,
doubt, shine brighter. Thank you guys. I appreciate you, Ashley. You look gorgeous, darling. I love a
thank
good
you.
shade moment. I pause for a second, do a quick pose. Boop, boop, boop. This will be, look at those pictures. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this